The Paul Leslie Interviews.
Ladies and gentlemen, our special guest, Al Schmitt, is a recording engineer, mix engineer. He's done record production, and he's a lover of music, a 21-time Grammy Award winner. Mr. Schmitt, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome.
I want you to take us back a little bit. What was life like when you were growing up?
When I was little, wow. Well, I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and we were very, very poor. My uncle, my father's brother, had a recording studio in New York City called Harry Smith's Recording. So my escape from being poor was to get on the subway when I was 7, 8 years old and go over to Manhattan and spend the weekend with him. He didn't have any children. He was not only my uncle, he was also my godfather. So he treated me like I was his son. And so I got to spend every weekend. You know, he had a beautiful apartment on Riverside Drive. He had a beautiful car. He just lived well. He took me to great restaurants. He took me to sporting events. And I got to hang out in the studio all weekend, which is when I fell in love with music and recording.
Take us back to that day, the first time you went into a recording studio. What are your memories? What was exciting about it?
Oh, boy, my memories were he was recording a big band. And I remember when they would play it down and then he would have the musicians move around in different places so they could get a better balance. I also remember he made all the musicians take their shoes off because you could hear their foot tapping, on the wood floor. Those are some of the things and just all the equipment that was there, lathes and that kind of stuff. I had never seen anything like that, so I was totally in awe.
What is the most important thing for a recording engineer to do or to keep in mind when making a recording?
The most important thing is to remember that the music comes first. You got to get yourself out of the way, get your ego out of the way, and it's all about the artist and the music you're recording. I think that's the most important thing.
I was listening to this interview that you were doing, and you said somebody posed a question to you. They wrote in a question, and they said, "What's more important, good recording equipment or a good room?" And you said, "Ideally, both. But if you had to pick one, you would go with good recording equipment."
Yeah.
The way that things are changing with recording, tell me about what you've seen throughout the years in terms of just the ability. I mean, I've heard about albums being done in people's bedroom.
Well, yeah, that happens a lot. And unfortunately, some of them are successful, but that doesn't necessarily mean they sound good. A lot of the stuff that's being done in guys' homes are they qualify as a recording, but they're not top-notch kind of music. And, if you're trying to capture sounds, really capture sounds, what a good instrument sounds like, you're not going to do that in your bedroom. I mean, you can get maybe a decent sound on a voice, but it's not the same as if you're in a beautiful room. And certainly you can't put a bunch of strings in your bedroom or a big band or any of those things. So there are a lot of limitations of recording at home. I don't have a studio at home, and I don't think I would ever have one, because if I'm such a perfectionist in what I do that I would be getting up in the middle of the night and going into the studio to make sure I had enough bass on things or whatever.
How did you meet Phil Ramone?
Oh, I met Phil in New York. I met Phil a while back. We got introduced to one another. We never really got close until he called me one day and said, "Hey, Al, are you busy so-and-so?" He gave me a couple of dates, a couple of weeks. It was like 3 weeks, these dates. And I said, "Well, let me check." And I checked my book, and I said, "No, I'm cool, Phil." Let me preface this. Before this, I did an interview for Mix magazine, or one of those magazines, and someone said, "Do you have any regrets regarding your career?" And I said, "I have one regret. I never got to work with Frank Sinatra." And so anyways, now back to the Phil Ramone story. So he calls me, and I got the time for him, and we're talking, chatting. He asked what my fee was, and I told him, and he kind of hesitated for a minute, and then he said, okay. So he gave me, my rate. Just before we hung up, I said, by the way, who's the artist? And he said, Frank Sinatra. I said, geez, Phil, if you'd have told me that in front, I would have done it for nothing. So then he said to me, yeah, well, if you had asked me for more, I would have given it to you. So that was, and then Phil and I became extremely close friends. We were almost like brothers the last 20 years of his life. We spent a lot of time together, made a lot of records together. After the Sinatra record, he used to call me all the time when he came out to California to record.
When he told you about the Sinatra project and after you got over the excitement, what were your first thoughts?
Well, when I was a kid, I used to play hooky from school to go to the Paramount Theater in New York to see Sinatra. I mean, Sinatra was, my idol when I was a kid. Loved everything he did. The excitement of thinking, oh my God, I'm finally going to meet this guy and be in the same room with him. It was beyond words for me. It's like meeting Babe Ruth or Joe DiMaggio or somebody like that, Jackie Robinson.
In course of working on the Duets project, did you have a lot of interactions with Mr. Sinatra?
Yeah, quite a bit. At one point, he asked me what I did. He said to him, well, I'm the guy in the booth making you sound good. And he said, keep it up, kid.
What was he like to work with on a professional level?
For me, he was amazing. He was very professional. The first day he came in, he sang for about 5 minutes and he said, not tonight, guys. His voice just didn't have it. He was kind of hoarse, and so that was it. The next night he came in and he just killed it. I mean, it was great. We did one take. We did 9 songs in I don't know, maybe a 3.5, 4 hour period or something like that. And the only time he ever stopped was if the tempo wasn't right for him. He was so professional, it was ridiculous. He knew exactly what he wanted to do. He had great microphone technique. He was wonderful.
Is there a track from either Duets Volume 1 or 2 that you're especially proud of?
Oh, boy, I don't know. I think the one with Luther Vandross, I think, that was exceptionally good. Lady Was a Tramp, I think. That may be one. They were all great. And, the arrangements were great. The band was great. We got to use both rooms at Capitol Studio A and Studio B. And we had all the strings and in B. So, we had it wide open, but we had some separation there. So that made it great. It was just a great project to do. And everybody was so professional. It was Hank Catania, who was Sinatra's right-hand guy at the time. He was great. He was so helpful. Everybody was excited about getting this done. Everybody knew it was his last project, and we wanted it all to be a great one. When Frank started to sing, and it sounded so good, and I looked at Phil, and Phil looked at me, and we both had these shit-eating grins on our face. And his manager, Sinatra's manager at the time, was right next to Phil, and we were all just glowing. It was just, oh boy, here we go. Then it was just a matter of capturing everything.
All of the duets were done with the other singer that was joining Sinatra. They weren't in the same room. Why was that done that way?
You know what? I think in some cases they didn't even know who was going to do the duet with Frank on these songs. So Frank sang the song down from top to bottom like there was nobody going to do a duet. That was it. He just sang it down like he would normally sing the song. And then it was up to Phil Ramone to figure out who they were going to get to do it and how they were going to do it,
I see. A moment ago you mentioned Capitol Studios.
Yeah.
Tell us about that room. As a sound recording engineer, what is Capitol Studios like to work in?
It's incredible. It's my favorite place to work in right now. and has been for so many years. I've done so many records there. It's almost like home to me. I know the room so well now. I know it like the back of my hand. The room just sounds great. They have great equipment. They have the greatest maintenance staff. I mean, everything works all the time. And if something does go wrong, it's fixed 5 minutes. I've been in studios where things go down and an hour goes by before you're back on again, and you got a room full of musicians, and it just takes the wind out of your sails. It's just that never happens at Capitol. It's an amazing room, and it's a versatile room. You can do all kinds of things in that room. I just love it.
One recording artist who did an album at Capitol Studios that you mixed the album for, Robert Davi, the album On the Road to Romance. What are your memories from that project?
Oh, those are all fond memories. I remember when they were recording it, actually. They were recording in Studio A, and I was doing something else in C, and I would go in to say hello and, just kind of listen for a little while. So it was going really well. And then I think Phil got involved with Robert on vocals and helped him with his vocals and get the vocals done. And then I was just really blessed and lucky to mix the record. And it was a fun record to mix. Robert was a great guy. He's a great actor. And I remember him from, the James Bond movies and those things. So it was just really fun for me to meet him. And how well he sang those Sinatra things. He knew Sinatra inside and out. And it was great. It was a really fun project to do. Everybody had a great time doing it. There was no tension. It was just great.
What do you think about him as a vocalist?
Robert?
Yeah.
Oh, he's a terrific vocalist. He had classical training when he was young. I mean, he could have been an opera singer. He's terrific. Just a matter of having the right person. Unfortunately, Phil isn't around anymore, but Phil was a perfect guy for Robert. Phil is a gentle guy and an incredibly knowledgeable guy. So I think Robert can get somebody like that to guide him through these vocals. He's terrific.
One of the albums you worked on, another album of many classic songs, the Paul McCartney album, Kisses on the Bottom.
So what's your question?
First of all, what made you chuckle there?
Yeah, that was one of the most fun projects I've ever done in my life. Now, after I did Sinatra, someone said to me, God, is there anybody else you want to work with? I said, well, there's a few other people now. I said, Paul McCartney's one, Bob Dylan's one. So here I am doing Paul McCartney. And I have to tell you, I've worked with a lot of people. Paul McCartney is one of the nicest, most professional people I've ever worked with. He comes in the control room. He introduces himself to everybody. Hi, I'm Paul McCartney. No kidding, and he's just amazing. And he's an incredible musician. And we were scuffling along trying to find the right way to do these things because he had never done them before, except they were songs that his parents and his relatives would sing. But once he found it, and he was the one, boy, he just locked it. That was it. It was just a ball. And then I got to work at Capitol with him, and I worked at Avatar in New York, which is another incredible studio. It's one of my favorite studios. And it's my favorite in New York, obviously. And then I got to work in Studio B at Abbey Road, Studio 2, which is where they did all the Beatles records with Paul. And for us to be there and all telling us stories about how they made their records and what was going on. It was unbelievable time. And one of my all-time favorite records.
It's interesting that so many of these artists you mentioned, McCartney, Bob Dylan, Robert Davi, all of these guys are doing these songs that are from the 40s, and sometimes 20s, 30s, early 50s. The American Songbook. Why do you think that these singers are so attracted to that music?
Wow. Well, one of the things, the songs are so great. Those songs are they're American classics. Tell me the song that was number one in the United States 2, 3 years ago. Tell me, does anybody sing that song now? Is anybody covering that song? But no, but those songs that were written by all those guys, us, Hammerstein, all of them, Cole Porter, those songs, people are still recording. They were done 50, 60 years ago, and people are still recording them because they're great songs. They tell stories. They're great songs to sing because there's an emotion to them. It's amazing. And I love the fact that both Sinatra and McCartney got the essence of the song. They knew the story they were singing. They weren't singing words. They were telling a story. I think that's why those songs, that's why people keep doing them. And I just did that record with Dylan, and God, that was incredible. And he's told me he's been wanting to do that for 40 years. And to be able to do that with him was another thrill, another great thrill in my life.
Tell us about meeting Mr. Dylan the first time. When did you meet him?
I met him at the studio when he came in. We recorded at Capitol in Studio B. We were in the room, the main recording room, and he said, "Boy, the room sounds good." And I said, "Yeah, this is a really nice room. Nat Cole did a lot of his stuff there and all." So he said, well, and my assistant at that time, Chandler Harrod, was with me. So he said, well, where would I sing? He said, boy, it sounds good right here. So Chandler said, well, how about right here? And that's where he put the mic stand. That was it. And then we just talked about how we wanted to do things and the best way to go about it. We were off and running. The first day, he's a very private guy. We would talk, but there wasn't a lot of conversation going on. But at the end, when he knew that I was on his side and really there to try to do the best for him, he started to loosen up. And at the end of the first day, and we had 2 or 3 things that we did that were really, really nice. I gave him a big hug, and I don't think people do that to him too often, but I just put my arms around him, gave him a big hug, and he kind of stiffened for a second. And then the next thing I know, he relaxed, and there was a big smile on his face, and that was it. And from then on, it was a walk in the park. It was just so much fun. And he would often say, well, what does Al think? Al, what do you think of that? And so forth. So I became a really big part of making that record. And it was a joy for me. I had a great time and a great admiration for Bob Dylan. I've always been a fan, anybody that can write, like a Rolling Stone or Blowing in the Wind or those kind of things. So I was always a fan, but to get to actually be quite intimate with him was really, really great.
I've read that he listened to the recordings of Sinatra sing these songs prior to singing them himself.
Yeah, that's correct. He did. He listened to the original recordings that Frank did in the 40s and 50s. And he would listen and not to do the song like Frank, but to get an essence of how Frank did it and what the song meant and all. Because, Frank's things were done with a big band or with a large orchestra, and we were in there with 5 guys. He made them his own, that's for sure.
Was there a song on Shadows in the Night that you thought he really, really shined on, in particular?
Oh, God, there were so many he did great. One of my favorites, just a great song, Don't Try to Change Me Now. That's one I really liked a lot. But, God, there's just so many great ones. Offhand, there'd be about maybe, I don't know, out of the 10 songs, 5 of them were my favorite. And there were songs that I loved, that were around when I was a kid growing up. I knew the songs well because I had recorded so many of them with other people. Yeah, it was great. And we had great working. He would come in at 3, and we'd work from 3 to 6, and then we'd take a 2-hour dinner break, and we worked from 8 to maybe 10:30, and that was it. And we worked Monday through Friday. We took the weekend off. It was just great. And he was just a kind, considerate guy. It was cool.
Do you think that he planned the fact that this album was released on the centenary year of Frank Sinatra's birth, 100 years later? Do you think that was planned, or do you think it was just a coincidence?
I don't know. He's wanted to do this for a long time, so I don't know. I can't get in his head and tell what was on Dylan's mind. But it's great that it came like that, isn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of magical.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I understand you recently worked on an album that's going to be coming out soon.
An incredible album with Pat Williams, a big band album with Pat Williams, the arranger, composer. It is sensational sounding record. One of the best records I've ever made, sound wise. It's just incredible. So that won't be out until September. And the name of the album is Home Sweet Home, Suite, Home Sweet Home, and they're all original songs. Frank Sinatra Jr. sings on it. Tierney Sutton sings on it. Patty Austin sings on it. The rest are instrumental cuts, and it's just a fabulous record.
What is the best thing about being Al Schmitt?
Oh, the best thing about being Al Schmitt. Oh, I have a wonderful family. I have so many wonderful friends. To be honest, I don't think I have an enemy in the world. So I think that's a good thing. Maybe that's not a good thing. Maybe that says something about me I shouldn't. But I am totally in love with what I do. You know, I get in a car, I drive, get on the freeway, drive to the first thing I do is say, thank you, God, for giving me this opportunity. You know, it's just, I'm just blessed. I go to work. I love what I do. I'm blessed that I do it well. That's it. And I'm still busy, and I've been doing this for 50 years, and I'm still able to do it and still go to work, and I smile all the time. And if it's somebody that gives me a bad time, I just don't work with them anymore. And nobody does that to me anymore. I get a lot of respect, so it's great.
What do you want to say to anyone who is listening?
Well, what I really want to say to the world and to everybody that's listening to this is be kind to all living things. There's too much killing in the world, and we have to stop. The other thing that I would say to anybody that wants to be doing what I'm doing or wants to be in the music business, follow your heart. Don't give up. And no matter what you're doing, if you're hired on as make coffee, make the best coffee ever. If you're hired on to clean the studio, make it the cleanest studio ever. Just do the best you can at whatever you're doing, and that will translate into everything you do from then on. Do absolutely the best you can.
My last question.
Yeah.
Who is Al Schmitt?
Al Schmitt is a kid that grew up in Brooklyn, played stickball in the streets, Ringalivio, had a bunch of friends growing up. Loved music from the first time I heard my first record. I don't know. I think an all-around gentle good guy.
Well, thank you very much for this interview.
You're welcome. And it worked out well.